Hi there, this is John Barbour, and I'm here to tell you why I love Lucy and an absolutely unknown, unbelievable story never told anywhere but to me by George Burns in this amazing autobiography, Your Mother's Not a Virgin, one night in 1982. It's a story by George Burns about why he loves Lucy. Now, in my case, in the mid 1970s, when I was a film critic at Los Angeles Magazine and at KNBC for 5 years, I was 10 years at Los Angeles Magazine from 1970 to late 1979 when I finally got my show, Real People, on NBC, so I stopped being a critic. Anyway, one day in the mid 70s, my wife and I are standing in line in Century City at a theater waiting to see a very popular show. I forget what it was, but we were in the middle of this very long line, and all of a sudden I hear this loud male voice say, "Hey, honey, you're standing behind the guy who's writing you love." Well, I turned around to see where the voice was coming from. When I turned around, I was staring into the face of Lucille Ball. And she says, "Oh my God, Johnny Barbour." And she grabbed me and she hugged me and she said, "I want you and your wife to know that my husband Gary and I fight every month over Los Angeles Magazine to get to see who reads it first. So I must tell you, aside from the brilliant writers who write my show, you are the greatest writer in the United States. I just love you and love your reviews." So if you would like to see what Lucy loves so much, you grab a hold of this book. It's called The Greatest Reviews I Ever Read. It's written by Carol Hennig, who helped edit my autobiography, Your Mother's Not a Virgin. And it's about the 10 years that I was the award-winning film critic at KNBC for 5 years and 10 years at Los Angeles Magazine. It is by far the most entertaining, the most interesting book about any movie critic in America that you will ever read. And I wish Lucy and Gary were still alive today, because they would have to buy bunches of them to give to their friends and not fight over it. And I cannot thank her enough for that. But now to the greatest story ever told about Lucille Ball. And it happened in 1982. I had just done my first documentary called Ernie Kovac's Television's Original Genius, nominated for a Peabody, a monster hit on Showtime. And this is the documentary that not only brought back the memory of Edie Adams, a talented singer who was his widow and trying to pay off his debts, it also made her able to pay off his debts, made her a multimillionaire before she died. In any event, what happened is some promoter, realizing she was a popular singer again, thought, you know what, I'm going to rent the Pantages Theater, and I'm going to find other famous singers from the 50s and 60s like Frankie Lane, Wild Goose, and songs like that. Anyway, and he was one of my favorites as a kid in the 50s and the 60s. So he rented the Pantages Theater on Hollywood Boulevard at Vine Street, sold out in 15 minutes, and at the end of the show, around 9:45, a deserved standing ovation for all of them. Well, my wife and I brought our son Christopher along to see it. He was 13 at the time, and Edie Adams' date was George Burns. Well, George was so happy and Edie so thrilled with the show, they wanted to extend the enjoyment of the evening by having a great late dinner. And the best place to have a great late dinner was at Scandia's at Doheny and the Sunset Boulevard. So we made a reservation. We got there, the six of us. Henry Bollinger was also there because he was my publicist and Edie's. And I was hoping that we'd be put in the private cellar since George Burns was such a star. But George wanted to be in the center of the restaurant where there was more light. So the maitre d' seated us there. We all ordered the filet mignon with the beefsteak tomato. George pulled out a cigar and began to talk. It was now a little after 10 o'clock. And talk, and talk, and talk. Not one of us yet had eaten a bite from the filet mignon or the beef tomato because we were dining on every word that he said. He was absolutely hilarious, talking about his life in show business, his life with his wife, what he thought about people. And he didn't think much about people. As a matter of fact, if they were sick, he wouldn't ever want to be around them. At the time, his wife was in Cedars-Sinai and sick. He says, I'm not going to visit her, not until she dies. And he said that about all his friends. Now, about this time, it's midnight after he's telling all these stories, and he tells my son Christopher, he knows my son is a very talented golfer, and he says, I hate golf, young man, because I have to play a sport where I can talk and where I can yell. And he began talking again, taking out another cigar. Now, when he pulled out that cigar, it was midnight, and the place was closing down. They had sent everybody else out. All that was left was the chef, in case George wanted something else, and the maitre d' to help serve whatever it was that George wanted. So I would ask for the bill. And when I asked for the bill, George asked for another cigar. So now we were in for more chit-chat. And here we are in the middle of this room, totally empty, the six of us, and George starts telling stories. And this is his favorite show business story. He says, you know, John, that stupid song that Ethel Merman sings, there's no business like show business. Well, the lyrics are incomplete. There's no business stupider or luckier than show business. That should be the title of the song, because that brings me up to my favorite broad in show business, and that's Lucille Ball. I was stunned he would call her a broad. I mean, Lucille Ball was by far one of the most talented, creative geniuses as an actress first and then as a comedian second who ever lived in that town. She was in no way an executive. She would never thought of being in business, except she got into it by accident because of her love of being a comedian and doing it the best she could. In the 50s, and even now, she was doing a radio show called I Love Lucy with a really handsome Irish American named Richard Denning. 6'2", blue eyes, blonde hair. I mean, gorgeous, gorgeous voice. Every woman who listened to the show wanted to be married to this guy. Anyway, Lucy gets a call from the head of CBS. And he said, hey, Lucy, you know, we are now building our shows for television and we need some material. And you have this monster hit radio show. So would you like to make a television show about I Love Lucy? And she said, no. And he said, what do you mean? You can't say no. You got a great hit radio show. You'll have a bigger television show because you were once a movie star and now they can see you on television. She said, no, because you will want me to have Richard Denning on as my wife. And he said, absolutely, because that's what you're known for. And she said, listen, everybody in America knows that my husband is that bongo-playing Cuban, Desi Arnaz. So if you want me to make a pilot, I will only make a pilot if Desi is my husband. And he says, are you kidding? Desi Arnaz? I mean, this, what is Latin Cuban or something? America isn't ready for that. She says, well, I was ready to marry him, and I'm ready to work with him, and if you want a pilot, I will do that. And he said, absolutely not. So she hung up on him, and he kept calling back. And it was the same answer all the time. George kept insisting and puffing and swatting away, and she kept turning him down. So finally, he said, listen, Lucy, this is the head of CBS, I will ask you, or I will beg you to make a pilot with Richard Denning. If you do not like it, and that's the final decision is yours. I will let you make a pilot with Dizzy, your husband. She said, hey, it's Desi, okay? She said, I have your word on that? He said, absolutely right. So she made the pilot with her husband, who was on radio, Richard Denning. She did not like it. And she told the head of CBS, I do not like it. So you're going to keep your word? You're going to let me make this with Desi? And he said, well, okay, I'll let you make it with Desi. So Desi shows up on the set. I can't do the accent. And he only sees one camera. And he says, hey, hold it a minute. I need 2 more cameras. This is going to be a 2-camera show. No show had ever been a 2-camera show, especially a comedy. And then he said, and by the way, put in some bleachers because they're going to have an audience too. Well, none of the technicians took a shine to him because this was all new to them, but he insisted on that. And if they complained, Lucy said, you just leave him alone. Let my husband do his thing. He did his thing. They shot the pilot and they sent it to New York. So when it gets to New York, the head of CBS looks at it. He doesn't like it because he doesn't like that accent and the fact that we got this Hispanic guy on CBS television. And he's shaking his head that he doesn't like it. But he's showing it to, accidentally in the room with him, is the president of Old Gold Cigarettes, who's laughing his ass off. And he said, God, that woman is fantastic. What a show. I'll buy 13 of them right now. So he ordered 13. He bought 13. Now the CBS president is stunned and elated and calls back Lucy and says, hey, Lucy, you're going to be a star on television. We made a sale. And she said, no, you didn't. He said, yes, I did. I just sold Old Gold 13 episodes of the show. And she said, no, you didn't. And he said, yes, I did. You want to see the contract? And she said, well, you can shove that contract up your ass because you never signed my husband. And then the guy gasped. He said, well, what do you want? What do you want? I'll pay him whatever you want me to pay him. And she said, well, you're not going to pay him a nickel. She said, my company will pay him. And he said, what do you mean your company? It's CBS is going to do this show. And she says, no, it's not. And he said, listen, Old Gold just bought 13. And she said, well, you tell the president of Old Gold to go blow smoke up his ass. I will be paying my husband out of Desilu Productions because we are going to form a production company. You are going to buy I Love Lucy from my production company. And that is how accidentally Lucille Ball, because of her love of being an excellent comedian, accidentally became the owner of Desilu Productions. Then she bought RKO, where RKO and Desilu Productions brought at least a half a dozen of the greatest television shows in history to the world. And they're still playing in the world. Oh my God. That, and my son now, who is the co-executive producer of Criminal Minds, was 13 at the time. To this day, he said, Dad, that is my favorite show business story ever. So if you loved that story and want to hear a few more about Lucy, you get the greatest book ever written by anyone in show business. It's called Your Mother's Not a Virgin. And Don Jeffries, the best-selling author, said it's David Copperfield in Hollywood. And Europe's greatest essayist and film critic, Alexander Miltic, said not only is it the greatest book ever written in America about anybody in show business, it's one of the greatest books ever written in America. So, in saying so long for now, I will do my Old Gold commercial. Goodbye.